Ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here for another epic debate. This is going to be a fun one, folks. It's a juicy one. So we are thrilled to have these guys here. These guys are both really pleasant. They've been really, you could say, pro the channel. They've always been very encouraging and a pleasure and supportive. And so we are thrilled to have them here. I want to let you know their links are both in the description. And I'll remind you of that as the debate goes on. And if this is your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button, as we've got a lot more debates coming up that we are very excited about. And if you want a reminder, click that notification bell and you get reminders of those debates as well. And very excited, folks, if you have any questions for the speakers, we're going to try to squeeze in a tiny bit of Q&A at the end. We've got this is going to be a short and sweet debate. We're going to try to squeeze in as many questions as we can. And with that, given that Chris is taking the affirmative, I suppose for this open discussion, Chris, if you want to kind of get the ball rolling, and this isn't like a formal speech or anything, this is just kind of where you kind of like lay out why it is you have the perspective you do. And thanks again, gentlemen, for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having us. Look, I guess from my point of view, first thing I want to say is I think political correctness is actually a good thing when it's done right. Something I'm very proud of is that I live in a society where things like racism, homophobia, transphobia are things that can be tackled and can be confronted when they do pop up. That's something I definitely say that political correctness has played a part in. The problem I see at the moment, though, is I think political correctness has gone too far. And I think that's evident in a lot of the woke culture that's out there, the cancel culture that's out there, where political correctness seems to lean to one side of politics and favour that over the other. I think that there's been a lot of that. I think there's cases where people who, on genuine misunderstandings, can be dragged through the mud. They can be demonised. There seems to be a lot of that going on, more so than it has in the past. Even, I think, cases, and you know, I speak as someone who doesn't live in the US, so I'll throw my hands up and say I don't completely understand what's going on over there, but just people with the action of wearing a MAGA hat in support of, I guess, a president that, from what I can see, about 50% of the population or 50% of the voting population support. You know, maybe more, maybe less. I don't know what the current feel is, but just the fact that action of supporting a political candidate and a mainstream political candidate can see you cancelled, can see you demonised and dragged through the mud. That to me shows that political correctness has taken that one step too far. What it also does is it means that where there is important conversations that need to be had on things like, on trans rights, on same-sex marriage, on LGBTQ, on feminism, any of the things, any of the progressive issues that we do need to still advance that little bit further, because people are being shouted down rather than being able to have the conversation. What that means is the conversation stalls and you've just got a shouting match on either side. So that's, I guess, my position and my thoughts on it. And I'm happy to have the conversation.
Sure. I guess I don't think the idea of PC culture is kind of silly to me in general. The framing of the question in general is a little bogus. But working under that framing, has it gone too far? Too far would imply like that there's things it does that are egregious in the name of political correctness. And I don't think you named a thing that is done for the sake of political correctness, like the MAGA hat thing. And I know you don't live in America, and I know I think Australian. It doesn't sound Kiwi to me. Is Australian correct?
Australian.
Okay.
Yep.
So, like for instance, the MAGA hat thing. That isn't a PC culture thing, right? That isn't like we are. And I say we as Americans. When Americans who didn't vote for Donald Trump see a MAGA hat, it isn't, hey, that person is wearing a MAGA hat because they support a Republican candidate, a very conservative candidate. It's because people get upset at that hat because of the way people that wear that hat act. It isn't the hat itself. It's the person wearing it. It's it extends through. It's basically a way for them to, and a lot of people do this shit, where it adds plausible deniability to their bigotry, right? You could say, well, it's just a political hat. I'm just wearing it because that's my candidate, right? And at the same time, they do it, and they're making their OK symbols, which I think we all understand. Not every OK symbol happens to be a bad thing. People can, score a 3-pointer in basketball and put 3 fingers up. You could say, hey, no, I'm okay, buddy. And then it starts to get to the point where people are, using them to dog whistle, right? And it's like, MAGA hats tend to be, and not every time, tend to be a dog whistle for other things. It tends to be someone wearing a MAGA hat that might be saying, well, it certainly is interesting that 13% of the population commits 50% of the crimes, and it's a dog whistle about their racism towards black people. I mean, and this shit happens all the time. It's because they, for some reason, can get away with this idea of plausible deniability. It has nothing to do with political correctness in general. Political correctness is when someone is like, hey, don't use the T slur in regards to trans people. Try not to call gay people the F slur. Like, let's try to stay away from dropping the N bomb. Like let's try to treat people to a certain degree of decency, like in regards to things that they can't change about themselves. Like, and having a political identity is not the same thing as being gay. It just isn't. You are not protected. It is not innate to you to be conservative. It isn't. And while I disagree with people that want to throw punches at people wearing MAGA hats, I don't approve of that behavior. But at the same time, I totally understand why someone might want to do that, especially if they're from a group of people that are being marginalized by people that wear that hat, such as trans people.
I think, and you mentioned examples, and I think what you've actually said potentially opens up to a bigger issue that I think political correctness could have caused. Sure. Now, initially when the MAGA hat came out, it literally was a political hat that, yep, it was probably something that Trump used. It was a catchy slogan, and he pushed that. Absolutely it was. From there, what's happened is, because it's been demonized, what's happened is it has had that dividing effect where people who are on the far right, absolutely, and those extremists and the bigots you're talking about now will use that hat as a symbol of to show their bigotry and like you said, get away with it. And I think that PC culture has played a part in that. I think what happens is Donald Trump, he's got this whole, it's us versus them, and look at what the woke left are doing. Look at what the establishment are doing. And what happens is every time that you've got these, you're racist for supporting, you're a bigot for this, you're a bigot for that. What it does is it further marginalizes and pushes people and plays right into his narrative. I think the sad reality is, I think Donald Trump, and I say this not as someone who is offering an opinion on US politics, because frankly it's got nothing to do with me. I care about the politics in my country, and I've certainly got political views, but the sad reality, I think, for the people who are pushing a lot of the PC culture is that Donald Trump will probably win, and it will probably be because one side of politics has just managed to marginalize completely another side of politics and push them to some of these more fringe and extreme views. I'll give you an example, and it's an example that happened in Australia. So a couple of years ago, I can see you shaking your head. I'm happy if you want to comment on that before I keep going.
Well, yeah, it implies that Donald Trump is a response to PC culture. And it isn't.
Yeah, I think it is.
But it definitely isn't, because in the years of Obama, we weren't even talking about trans people. We weren't talking about like what not to say to people. There wasn't this push to do anything. It was more, Donald Trump is not a response to far leftism being popularized. Donald Trump popularized far leftism, and as a result, far right got popularized too. Like it emboldened both sides, but Donald Trump was the catalyst. The only thing, like, we're talking like Gamergate online stuff that predates that shit, and that's not people in general talking about PC culture. Like that's like dumbasses like Sargon of Akkad saying really, really dumb shit about like these very, very fringe left people that you could find on the internet that aren't the majority of people. Like for instance, there was stuff back in the day, like a Milo Stewart video where it would go, and you might not have heard that fucking name in ages because they're a fucking child at the time, saying that all white people are racist, right? And obviously, not every white person is racist. However, the point of it was that, like, beyond that like there is an aspect of American life specifically that is foundationally racist, and they did a very poor job of communicating historical racism and systemic racism and all of these things, and just boil it down to, well, everyone's racist. Well, that's not the case, and it demonizes people. And so you get people like this being poor at having these open ideas. And then, of course, the 8 years of Obama. Let's be real. In America, and I know you didn't experience this firsthand, and maybe this is, I'm assuming this is going to be a very wide disconnect for the both of us during this discussion, is because you weren't here. And like, American culture is so incredibly different than pretty much any other culture, based on our size, based on our demographics, based on just the different things that were part of the founding of our culture, like the gun thing in general. Like, people actively fetishize guns. This isn't like in Australia, where you can just go, well, I guess we shouldn't probably have those anymore in the way that we have them, right? It isn't the same. It isn't the same with people in America. We have a history of systemic oppression, literally to the day. To the day, we have systemic oppression. The Trump administration recently banned trans people, like, from the military. Like, this is a thing that continually happens. And so when we have marginalized groups, and it's very interesting to hear someone say, "Oh, the right is marginalized in the United States." Nope. Before Obama, they had 8 years of a very far right evangelical person. We've had a history of far right candidates, and when I say far right, I mean far right compared to, like, our European and other Western countries, right? We are further to the right than usually most of the right wing groups. It's just interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that I wouldn't suggest that people who are on the right are marginalised in any way. But I think what it does is, I think people who are probably in the centre right feel marginalised by, I guess, the far left, and that can push them to the far right. And look, there's probably the same people who are in the centre left when they're, the far right pushes. I think that can push people to the far left. So that's probably more the point, I guess, I was trying to make. I think that because of where PC culture is, and not explaining things and not being prepared to have conversations, and doing that. And look, I know that I'm talking about, I'm not talking about the majority. I think how I see that PC culture or political correctness is going too far is because the reality is you've got a fringe group on the left, a fringe group on the right that are both jumping up and down, and the other 80% who are sitting in the middle are shaking their head saying this is crazy and it's gone too far.
In the United States, I don't think 80%.
Yeah, I look in Australia. I guess that's what I base it off. And look, we are very different here. I mean, to give you an idea, our Conservative Party is called the Liberal Party.
Right.
We have universal health care that even the most conservative person in this country wouldn't argue against, and the same with gun control. So it is. I guess we do have that. I guess we're probably talking a little bit from cultural divides.
Your conservatism is our liberal Democrat. Like, Hillary Clinton would run on the right wing party in your country. No, she'd be left. She'd definitely be. She's for private health care. She's for guns. She's hawkish. Like, economically speaking, she's very corporate. She is not for social programming. She is more for the elite.
She'd probably be what we'd call, I guess, in the right of the Labor Party. So there's what's called Labor right. So the Labor Party is our left wing party. Look, I guess where it's different
Democrat.
for us. Yeah,
I guess so. Democrat
is
very similar, like a Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, so someone like Tulsi Gabbard would probably be right in the middle. But where we've got the difference here is because we do have compulsory voting, what tends to happen is it tends to fall towards the middle. Whereas if you don't have compulsory voting, what tends to happen is the people who are on the fringes probably have that louder voice because you've got a lot in the middle who just don't care.
Right.
So
we also have
it's
first
probably
past
there's probably
the post, and we don't have a parliamentary system.
Whereas we've got a preferencing system.
Right, and there's lots of differences between how things work. For instance, Donald Trump lost the popular election by 3 million votes. Like, so when you said half the country supports him, it's not the case.
But if you live in California and you know that,
but it wasn't just California. But yeah.
Oh no, but I guess to use the example, if you have a look, and I only know this because I did a recent study on you had higher voter turnout in the states that were up for grabs, and that would tend to happen. I mean, if I lived in California and I was a Trump voter, which I don't think I would be, but why would I bother going out? I know what the result's going to be. It's not going to make any difference because all of that electoral college. I do think that you guys do have a big problem with your
and yet
your
in spite of that, he still lost the popular vote. Like.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is like he does not have national support. The way our system is set up is sadly skewed towards the Republican Party's like Southern strategy, lots of gerrymandering, lots of voter suppression effects, because obviously people who aren't white tend to vote for left-wing parties. People who are poor tend to vote for left-wing parties because the right wing tends not to do things in those people's interests, which is a thing in America.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have a look at Michigan, Michigan voted for
I
Trump.
live in Michigan. I'm from Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah, Michigan did vote. Michigan's a purple state, though. Michigan flops back and forth all the time, and since he's losing jobs, I would not be surprised if, because of the way the sanctions on China hurt farming, and most people here are in farming or auto, I would not be surprised if Michigan went blue again this time around. But we'll see what happens because, I mean, it just depends on turnout. So, but beyond that, like as far as the PC culture thing is concerned, I don't know. Like the president has said things that are active. It's not even PC to be like, hey, don't advocate for sexual assault. Like, it's not right. So like people are like, there's this weird thing that happens with right-wing people. They change their ideas based on who their guy is in the White House, right? Like we got extra religious when George W. Bush took over. We right-wing people were like, fine, I'm super religious now. Now evangelism exploded under George Bush, and like this is just
that's the same on both sides, though, because I mean it's realistically as a species we're tribal. We are tribal. It's
I agree that we are tribal. I think the left has a big problem not being tribal enough to win electoral college elections. Like the only reason that we have Republican people get voted in ever on a national level is because left-wing people are like, well, I like Bernie, and some people are like, well, I like Hillary. Like right-wing people are like, whoever our guy is, we're voting Team Red. That's how it works in America. They're very good at it. It's part of the problem. So the right gives a much bigger shit about winning than they actually do about like anything else. And Donald Trump being in charge has not helped many of those people unless they were already well off. So I don't really understand.
Yeah, look, I think, and look, I am someone who sits on the right. I guess what you call centre right in Australia. I'm a supporter of our Liberal Party, which, as I mentioned, is the Conservative Party here. Look, the things Donald Trump said, I think a lot of them are horrific. So I don't necessarily think it's a right-wing thing. And look, I'm not someone who's going to vote, but look, we've just had a situation in Australia. We're actually suffering through some of the worst bushfires imaginable at the moment. Our country's quite literally on fire. It's where I am now. It's 37 degrees. We've got high winds, and all I can see outside is smoke. Now, our Prime Minister, who is a right-wing Prime Minister, he decided that he went overseas on his holiday for Christmas and went to Hawaii. So
yeah,
what would normally happen, I guess, it's the people who support him would say, no, that's okay. The people who don't wouldn't. Now, I can tell you myself and other people who are on the centre right and on the right in general in politics in Australia, we've all come out and we've condemned him quite harshly because it was the wrong thing to do.
Right. In America,
So
that wouldn't happen. They'd be like, he deserves a break. He's the greatest president of all time. Like, quite literally. The dude golfs constantly. Like, he literally does. He was golfing during fucking Puerto Rico being underwater and being destroyed, which is there's our Americans. Like, this is a thing this guy does. Like, and so this PC culture backlash shit is like, no, we're just like, hey, this guy's fucking bad. And it's not just Trump. It's like stuff in general. Like, an election ago, a midterm, they ran an actual rapist. And they voted.
Well, that's wrong.
Of course it is. But this is what we're talking about.
Here.
This is the kind of shit I'm dealing with that you're not. You can go to Australia and be like, oh, that guy took a vacation while our country's on fire. Fuck that guy, which is great. That's exactly what you got to do. Meanwhile, I'm like, hey, can we not have the fucking child predator run for things? And he lost the election, but like barely. The fact that he still ran, the fact that he was comfortable running, the fact that Donald Trump supported the fucking guy. Like, this is the kind of shit we deal with here. It isn't about if their politics are right. They're not going for policy. They're going for fucking identitarianism. They're like, oh, they play identity politics way more than anybody the fuck else does. It's absolutely disgusting.
Both sides play it.
Absolutely both sides play it, but like not as often. Like so. For instance, there's this idea that like you get woke points for shit, right? Yeah, I'm assuming you've heard of woke points or like oppression Olympics. These are not things in lefty spaces. In lefty spaces,
no, exactly.
This
of course they're not.
This is a made up concept. This is a made up concept by right-wing people. When someone's like, for instance, okay, so you talk to somebody and they might be, I don't know, disabled, gay, and trans or whatever. Like they have a whole bunch of stuff going on with them that makes them not as normal, air quotes, as your average person, right? And so when someone is talking about, say, for instance, okay, and maybe they're black too, in America. Say someone's talking about police brutality in the United States. And someone's like, okay, so from a black, disabled, gay, trans experience, I don't feel like I am helped very much by this system of people. The police themselves are weaponized against me. They don't feel like they protect or serve me. It feels like we only have an antagonistic relationship and blah, blah, blah. And then a bunch of white dudes are like, well, no, that's not what the police are for. My experience with police is fine. It's like we have this idea that like, it's not about whether or not they get points for being different than us. It's about understanding that those points of differentiation are important to the person's experience in life. And if you just understand that, yes, someone who is black is going to have a different experience in the United States than someone who is not black, myself. I'm a straight cis white guy. Like I have I don't have these points of differentiation except for maybe the atheism thing, which doesn't come up. I can't wear atheism on my skin, right? And we don't live in a super religious country day to day. Under the George Bush, it was much worse. Under this guy, I support these marginalized groups, right? Because they are fucking marginalized, and it's not like we're not saying like, hey, this person is right because they're gay or they're right because they're trans. It's like they're probably right about their experiences about being gay or being trans, right? Because I'm not that. I don't know how that goes. I don't know how it feels. And so all it is about listening. It isn't about them being correct or them getting points in a discussion where they ought not have it. It's I don't know. It's silly.
Look, and you know what? I agree with a lot of what you said there, but I think the problem is the way you've articulated that is perfect, and I think most people would. I couldn't see how anyone who is, a normal thinking person would disagree with you. But the problem is when you've got one side who the second anyone wants to ask a question or wants to have a discussion, they're shouted down with, you can't have this discussion because you're white and you're racist. I've experienced that myself.
I guess it depends. Some people definitely are really bad at communicating this kind of thing. I absolutely agree.
Absolutely. And that's where the issue comes.
But you're an atheist, right?
Going to absolutely.
And you're recently an atheist, like in your life. You said you used to be a pastor, right?
Well, no, I was a church leader. I was studying to be a pastor, but
for how long?
I wasn't actually ordained.
Sure, but I mean, like for
so how long have I been an atheist?
The church was part of your life for kind of some time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when you lost that faith, did you go through your angry atheist douchebag phase? We all do it. Like where
a little bit, yeah.
right, right,
Where
right.
everyone tries.
So this
Hunter,
is what
yeah.
I'm talking about. So when people finally understand what intersectionality is, they go through a douchebag phase. When they find out that, like, holy shit, there is systemic oppression on people and it's fucked up. They get angry. And while I understand why they get angry, I also this happens a lot. We have people, and this is a discussion that we in Lefty Spaces have a discussion about. There's this purity testing bullshit that happens. Absolutely. But I don't think that's PC culture. I don't think, like,
it can be, and you're right. You do get the angry ones, but you also get the people who are very much well established within that community who will keep pushing points. Who, I guess, they almost make a living out of pushing these extreme viewpoints, and all it does
give
is
me an
just
example of
marginalise.
one of these extreme viewpoints.
Okay, so I'm just trying to think of her name.
Christy Winters.
2 seconds. I have no idea who that is.
Okay, good.
What's her name? I can picture this person. Okay, Jasmine Abdul Magid. She's an Australian. You wouldn't have heard of her. Okay, so what? And I guess this is hard because I guess we're introducing people and concepts that we wouldn't have heard of. Now, she's an Islamic activist, very much on the left. She's Sudanese origin, but what she's done is she's actually made a career from basically telling anyone who's white that they're a racist. Anyone who doesn't believe, anyone who is an atheist or is a Christian, that they're Islamophobic. She's someone who has made a career out of labeling people. So that's one example I've got from Australia. As far as America, we see bits and snippets, and I know who some of the people are. It is hard to give you those examples. I'll give you another example from Australia. So in 2016, 3 students from Queensland University.
But she's for Sharia law, it looks like.
Not
Sharia
really, no.
law allows for multiple interpretations. It's about mercy and it's about kindness, is a quote from her.
Yeah, she came out and said that Islam's the most feminist religion out there.
Yeah,
so
see, there's people that
but
do this kind
she's
of
a
thing.
hero of the left here.
And maybe she's right about some stuff, but
possibly, but you can't have the conversation because of anytime you try to, she'll shout people down and just call them a racist and Islamophobic, a bigot. So it kills the conversation. So instead of being able to change someone's mind with what could be good points,
I guess I don't see one person being an entire culture of, because I don't see this happen very often at all, to consider that PC culture, which I guess we haven't really defined it, but I would define as like trying not to use harmful language towards people in the best way you possibly can without in a way that doesn't tend to limit free speech. But and you can redefine it if you'd like. I don't see people being shouted down a lot, because I see it on the right as well. When you say like, oh, someone just doesn't let anybody talk. Like, have you looked at Ben Shapiro before? Like, he'll immediately.
I can't stand that guy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is like when you have these people that make their living on their ideology, right? You're not going to move them, right? Because when I hear PC culture, I don't think heads, like talking heads that represent a left or a right or whatever. I think of the people in it because that's who makes the culture, right? And so you can't have a culture with just one person or even a dozen people. It has to be like hundreds of thousands, millions of people following these sort of things. And I've never heard of this person, and I guarantee if I have a conversation with this person and she brings up Sharia law, I'm going to have a big problem with her saying anything about her religion should be pushed onto anyone else because we live in a secular country. This is the kind of shit that you don't get to do. Like, that sounds conservative as fuck. And there's lots of people on the left that are actually conservative and they don't realize it. Think a TERF, a trans exclusionary radical feminist, where they're like, trans people, trans women aren't women because they were born with dicks or whatever. And you can't have a woman's experience if you haven't had a woman's experience your whole life. And it's like, Okay, but like we're having a discussion about gender, not sex, and we're having a discussion about like from the moment they transition, they will be treated as a woman. Like there are things about this that are different, and that's fine. But obviously, there's lots of things that are the same, and that's I think we have to talk about that too. And like calm the fuck down, you're a turf. Like there's people I've talked to far left people that said race mixing is bad. Like. So, like, these people aren't actually far left, in my opinion, and nor are the people when I don't know, someone who's like the Jews are behind whatever the thing, like the Jews, those aren't Republicans, right? Those are fucking Nazis. Those are you've gone from being a normal conservative to a far right person, like, and people can't like necessarily like lump them into one another. But when you have the president of the United States putting someone like, I don't know, Steve Bannon, who wrote Mein Kampf 2 Electric Boogaloo, maybe we should probably get these people out of office. Maybe we shouldn't have Stephen Miller, who wrote Mein Kampf 3 The Quickening. Maybe we shouldn't have those guys being in near or around heads of state. I don't think we should probably be having these people.
I would agree if that's what they've done. And look, I don't know what the
you should read Steve Bannon's anti-Jew book. It's awful. And
I
Stephen
think
Miller's the same way.
There is a massive problem on the right, and absolutely the culture on the far right is horrific. And you know, as someone who is, you know, I'd consider myself, you know, I'm fairly socially liberal. You know, as far as most of the things you know, it's you know, I saw J.K. Rowling's comments and sort of looked into them, and actually had a discussion on my channel about it last night. And you know, I completely disagree with that. You know, I think that, you know, a trans woman is a woman, and that's something that's not normally attributed to the right, but there's a lot of people, I guess, in my circles who have that view, and you get that on both sides. And I think that the far right does have a problem, but I think the far left does have a problem as well. And I think what's happening is on both sides, and I guess the political correctness is probably more identified with the left. It can be identified with the right as well, I guess, especially when it
thou shalt
comes
not
to
say his name in vain.
Yeah, exactly, stuff like that. Yeah, so there is that, and I believe that does go too far on both sides. I think there's a sensible middle, and I think political correctness is something that's important, and it's played an important part in progressing society to, you know, we're not there all the way. We're not there all the way, and we've got a long way to go. But you can't throw out extreme views that are too far to one side or the other and expect people to be able to have the conversation.
Sure, I guess it depends, but what's the middle on trans people deserve human rights?
There is no middle.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
That's not an extreme viewpoint.
It's not, in my opinion, either, but that's what we're discussing in the United States. Like the middle used to be like, well, we should have some slaves below the Mason-Dixon line, but not above it. Like, that's not the middle. You're still shit. This isn't good. We should not be doing this. The middle is not to put Mexicans in cages. That's not a middle. This is a humanitarian problem. And so, like a middle is like, okay, how should we do healthcare, right? That's a middle. That's a discussion where you can have a middle. In my opinion, you're morally wrong if you say we should privatize it, but you can at least have the discussion. You can have a discussion about, like, how should we tax? There's a middle to that probably, but like there's not a middle to how to treat one another. And so, like, I understand why people would engage in PC culture. It might seem like they're going too far, but like these people just really fucking want to be okay.
So one of the things I do, and not just online, but in the real world, is I help people who are transitioning out of religion. Now, a lot of people who are transitioning out of religion have absolutely come from a bubble where, you know, they're told things like, you know, homosexuality is wrong, you know, trans people shouldn't have rights. So people who are coming out of that bubble, I've seen a lot of the times where, we'll have to sort of have the conversations, and you know, it's almost like a human rights 101. But the problem is, if we are going to have those conversations and say, hey, here's why trans rights are important, and here's an understanding of it, and you've got people who are just coming at these people who are trying to understand, going, if you disagree with me, you're a bigot, that's a problem. Yeah, because those people they're never going to, they're automatically going to get their back up, and they're going to feel marginalized, and they're never going to want to have that conversation. So that's a problem.
I tend to agree with you.
I see it happens a lot.
I tend to agree with you. However, it's easy for you and I to say.
Of course it is.
Because we're not parts of those communities. So I totally understand those communities being fucking upset. Like, I mean, yes, they're going to feel like you're being a bigot if they're a thing that you hate indiscriminately without logical reasoning. Like, they're going to be mad, and friends of those people are going to be mad too, and you are going to get called that. But I think maybe that we need to consider you being called a bigot. Are you asking people to change their language to better suit your feelings? Do you think that maybe being called a bigot doesn't feel good and it hurts your feelings? And if that's the case, then couldn't you empathize with somebody being called something else, whether it's a T slur, whether it's an F slur, whatever. We're just being hated on for whatever is intrinsically a value of their life, where you're being called a bigot for an opinion, not a thing that you can't change, right? Couldn't you empathize? Couldn't you take that moment and empathize, right? And so that's what I'm talking about.
You can, but it depends on the context in which it's said. So say, for instance,
sure.
And this isn't me, obviously, but say I've just come out of religion and I say to you, and we're talking about trans rights, it just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, why it doesn't make sense. Why would someone choose to do that? Now, if I were to say that, that's not me, and that isn't my view, obviously. I'm just going to very much give myself the disclaimer there. But I have heard people who have come out of religion who will say that. Now, great, there's a conversation that can happen because they're asking the question, and you can go through and you can explain, gender dysphoria. You can explain
Absolutely. I have these conversations all the time. Yeah.
But when people just go, you can't say that. You can't say that there's something. You're just a bigot. You don't, and shout them down. Then all of a sudden,
I disagree with those people all the time, right? Like, I agree with you in that case.
It sounds like we actually do agree on a lot.
Except I don't think that's a PC culture problem. I think what you're doing is first of all, the people that usually get shouted down are not asking genuine questions. Like, it's not like, hey, they're not qualifying. Like, hey, I genuinely am asking the following question, and I don't want anyone to be offended, because they're immediately going in like they deserve an answer, right? They deserve to talk to, say it's a trans person, hey, why do you want to cut your penis off? You know what I mean? Like, it can seem crass, it can seem rude to a person who, I mean, gender dysphoria is, because this has been happening basically about trans people recently, and this is usually the types of people that are getting shouted down are people that are being, air quotes, transphobic, whether it's actual transphobia or it's genuine ignorance, we'll discuss. But this happens with race too, right? Where someone will say, like, people say unbelievably racist shit to people all the time, and they don't really understand. But the person that is that race has heard that a million times, and so they're probably fucking over it, right? So it just takes, like, stop being. Like, if you know you're ignorant about a thing, and I don't mean ignorant like unintentionally ignorant. It's not a pejorative. I mean actually ignorant. Actually, I don't know about this. Like, I don't know, for instance, I don't know anybody that is an otherkin or whatever. You know what I mean? Those people that are like, hey, I identify as a wolf, right? I don't know anything about that. And if I want to talk to them frankly about their life, I'm not going to be like, so you like fucking wolves, loser? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to be like, okay.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
Of course. I'm going to be like, hey, genuinely asking. I don't know anything about this, and I want to ask. If you ask people from marginalized groups in a genuine way like that, you will get answers from these people. But when you start saying, you start using T slurs around people, or you start being like, that's well, why do black people commit so many crimes in America? You're not going to get responded well. Like, it's so interesting that anti-PC culture people are so quick to get fucking offended on this shit when they get called the fuck out for doing something that hurts someone's feelings. It's like, feelings matter, and you know that because it hurt your feelings when you got called the thing you don't want to be called. So just understand that if that happens to you, you're both probably, like, if you were trying to be genuine but it came out wrong, just apologize. Just be like, hey, whoa, I actually didn't mean to, piss you off. Like, it's okay. It's an internet discussion, most likely. You're not doing this in person. If you were doing it in person, I doubt both of you would be sniping at each other. So it's not like PC culture. The PC part of this ends up being the reason they have the discussion, not the reason they get shouted down. The shouting down happens to be someone ascribing someone else to, like, name calling and shit. And, like, PC people call people names all the time. And, like, no one's PC really. Like, the most woke people in the whole world that, like, can be total assholes to one another. Like, it happens constantly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so, and it's not, it's, I don't know. It doesn't seem to be the case in anyone's experience that it's PC
I think it comes
culture.
down to a definition.
It
I think it comes down to a definition.
So,
and
so
I think
go
we've
ahead
probably
and
got a
define
different.
it. Let's define it and talk about the definition then, because I already kind of defined it. Go ahead and you do it.
Where I think it's gone too far is I think that you've got the PC or political correctness, which we all, I think we agree on that. But what it's actually evolved into is that woke and that cancel culture that seems to be going on at the moment.
A lot of lefties are against cancel culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And look, most like I said, most people who are on the left, most people who are on the right are sane, normal people who roll their eyes at a lot of the extremes on both sides. But it's those extremes on both sides that is the part that is going too far. And it's not all PC. It's not all PC culture. I think political correctness, like I've said a number of times, it's an important thing, and it's got us to where we are. And I think it's important to call people out for bullshit, especially transphobia, where they're actively having a go or intentionally going to hurt someone. Where I think it does go too far is where the whole woke, you can't say that, you can't say this, where people don't understand the meaning behind it. If it's an absolute insult, no question.
Insofar as
I think it's blocking the conversation.
Sure. Insofar as the you can't say X conversation, when people say you can't say whatever it is, they don't mean you actually can't say it. They mean you can't say that without expecting the social cost.
Actually, it was a bad example I used
right
there.
But I mean, people do say that though. People often say like, oh, they're telling us what we can and can't say. Nobody's saying that. Someone's saying that if you call a black person the N-word, it has a social cost. Understand it has a social cost. You could say whatever you want. I don't care. But understand that if like your employer finds out that you're openly racist, it might not go well for you. And that's you're betting on yourself when that happens. Yeah. So I mean, don't do it. Just don't do it. I mean, you can, but I advise not to.
I'll give you a different example, and it's one that we'll both know about. And I don't know if it's the same reaction in the US as it has been in Australia. Greta Thunberg. Love her, hate her, agree with her, disagree with her. That's fine. What we've had in Australia is, and look,
she's just repeating science. She's just very passionate about the science.
Yeah. So people, there's been a few controversies where in Australia people have come out and said, look, is it fair to put a 16-year-old girl up and put this pressure on her, and is she the right spokesperson when we do have scientists?
Well, my response to that is listen to the fucking scientists then.
I'm not, yeah, well, I'd agree. I'm not offering an opinion on that. But what's happened is a lot of people have come out now, and this is an Australian issue, I don't know about the US, but attacking and saying, well, you can't say that she's a 16-year-old girl. You can't attack, you can't disagree with a 16-year-old girl, which I think is rubbish. If she's wrong, then you disagree with her. And I'm not saying that. But
yeah, no. I know you're not. What I'm saying is, that's not what's... When someone says you can't, I don't think anyone's saying you can't disagree with a 16-year-old girl.
We're getting that in Australia.
Okay. Well, they mean like when you disagree with the kid, right? She's just repeating science. Those are facts. Disagree. You can't actually disagree with facts. You can just opt out of believing them, which is a thing I guess you can do. But like, they're facts. It's true. Climate change is a thing. Insofar, the thing that you shouldn't be doing is being like going on to the kid. This happened with the fucking the Florida kids after the shooting. A bunch of those kids were like, "Hey, guns are fucking bad. My friends are dead." And a bunch of people like sent death threats to the children. And it's like, okay, so do you give a shit about kids or do you not, right? So do you give a shit about like you saying PC culture is going too far? You're saying now this kid can't say things. Okay, so I thought free speech was the big deal. So if this kid can't say things, even though they're true, what is it just because she's a kid you're upset about it? What are you upset about? The fact that you disagree about climate change, which is a fact, and it's burning your country alive right now. Like, I mean, so what's the big rub here? The rub here is the reason that they're pissed off at Greta is because she's a fucking kid, and they don't want to fucking hear it. They're like, you're a kid, you don't know shit. You know what she does know? Facts about climate change.
But see, and that's where the way you initially articulated that and saying, hey, this is a discussion. Why do you disagree? Here's what the science is. Here's what the scientists are saying. Absolutely, that's right. But when you've got someone, especially the older generation, and I don't know if it's saying there, the older generation really struggle to get their head around climate change. And I think
Absolutely.
that's due to a lot of right-wing shock jocks. So, I'll throw my hands up and say that's the extreme of my side of politics, and they've got a lot to answer for there. But when those people are saying, "Oh, well, she shouldn't be, paraded in front of the media," instead of saying, "Well, hang on, why not? What's the issue? Why do you disagree with it?" It's just, you can't say that about, she's a child. How dare you attack a child? What's going to happen to those people? All of a sudden, you don't have a conversation you can engage in. So those people are just going to bunker down in their thoughts, and the right wing shock jock who's on the radio saying, "Oh, the left are out to get us," it reinforces that stereotype. Whereas the reality is, what these things open is a great opportunity for a conversation where you can sit down and say, "Hey, well, let's talk about the science. Let's talk about why you disagree. Okay, maybe you disagree she shouldn't be put up. So who should be put up? The scientists. Well, what are the scientists saying?"
Well, sure. That's where I take that conversation when it happens, and I don't know. I get the same dumbass pushback from right wingers all the time. Like, it just happens. They're like, "Well, it doesn't matter. Climate change is a hoax." It's like, all right. I mean,
that is an extreme fringe.
It's not an extreme fringe here.
It is here, yeah.
Yeah, these aren't the extremes here. These are like 40% of fucking right-wing people. Like, if I look up, like how many...
Look at Australia now.
Percentage of Americans that believe climate change. Like, it's not that fringe. It's fucking sad.
That is sad, actually. Now, I do have to...
General U.S. population, 54% think global warming is happening. Global warming. So...
Yeah.
we
I was going to say, if we want to go to the Q&A, because I am a little bit limited. I've actually got a family Christmas lunch that I've got to go to soon. So I was going to say, if you want to get the Q&A part, I'm pretty comfortable with the conversation. Like I said, Jake, I think we probably agree on 90% of things, slightly different approaches and probably slightly different definitions.
You got it. Thanks very much, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure to have you. And I want to let you know, folks, their links are in the description. So if you enjoyed what you heard and you're like, I want more of that, you can find more at those links in the description box.
Jim, that was a little sexual.
So it's might have meant to be, but Steven Steen, thanks for your sexual super chat. He says, "No way to describe modern day debates looks correctly by being PC." Thanks, Steven. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Always makes me blush. Jesus is Lord is asking, Q for Jake. I have no idea what this means, so forgive me if it's racist,
it might be.
Not if it's racist.
It's fine.
If it's trolling is what I meant to say. Forgive me. He says, but I don't know if it's serious. He says, is white milk and the SAT racist?
Okay, so white milk is not racist.
That's dumb.
But the SAT in the United States. Okay, so racist is such a loaded fucking term. It doesn't mean that the SAT hates black people. Well, when people talk about there's a racial skew, and I went to school for education, buddy, so I'm sorry. This is like my field. They did studies on the SAT, and it's not just race necessarily, it's regional. But it happens that races in the United States tend to have different cultures a little bit, at least enough to make especially in their lexicon, the way that we talk to one another, right? And so someone from the rural areas, the farming spaces, usually white spaces, are going to talk differently to one another than people from metropolitan areas, especially poor metropolitan areas, which systemically, of course, happens to be minority communities because, well, there's a systemic racism problem in the way that we formed our country, and that is an undeniable fact. So when people say the SAT is racist, it's incredibly reductive. What they mean is usually the wording of some kind of question on the SAT might make more sense to someone that is from a particular culture. So it doesn't necessarily mean race, but it does mean it's usually classist, and because of the structure of America, it tends to be lower class people tend not to understand at a high enough rate, and most lower class people are minorities. So it's a trickle down effect. So the people that write the SATs are typically from coastal white spaces, and it's a national thing. So it's spread throughout the nation. We have a humongous country that is very different. So a first or a second generation Mexican immigrant is not going to get the same, if a good example is like a story problem for math, right? So if you hear like names of people that you've never heard before that are popular among white people. Let's say Carrie Underwood. That's the whitest person I can think of right now. Carrie Underwood, country singer, and Toby Keith do a thing and they carry apples from here to there. How many apples did they have when they dropped it off, like a normal math problem? A Mexican kid that has been in this country legally might not understand, might be spending a little bit too much time trying to understand who Carrie Underwood and Toby Keith are, rather than the question at hand. And so you tend to see some lower SAT scores now. When they changed it and they gave the SAT questions to people that grew up in that community, that were educators in that community, and they got to oversee it and change the wording of the SATs, there is no discernible score difference between any culture or race across the SAT nationally. So studies show that basically it comes down to cultural differences in wording of questions. That's a long answer for that, but that's what I went to college for. So
thanks so much. Appreciate it. Francesca King, we appreciate your question. Forgive me if I don't understand this. They said, is researching in someone's history a symptom of overcorrection for fear of seeming biased or racist?
I don't know what that means. Do they mean like going back to someone's tweets to see if they were racist 10 years ago?
Oh, I think that's probably what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe Chris wants to talk about that. I mean, I'm sure 10 years ago we both said shit we wouldn't say today.
Oh, look, I think one of the unfortunate things is I think society does change, and I think what's acceptable in society changes, and I don't think you can always judge people from the society that they're in. Certainly, if they've made efforts to correct themselves and to adjust those viewpoints, I don't think they should be demonized for things they once held. I used to think that I used to be a Bible-believing Christian. My view changed. Yeah. Also, James, I've just sent you a message as well. Apparently, there was an issue with the link.
Just fixed it. Sorry about that.
All good.
Thanks.
I also think it's contextual onto whether or not a thing that was bad when you said it or wasn't bad when you said it should be considered bad today. Like racism is probably not something that we should put up with.
Never.
Like I understand the Justin Trudeau blackface stuff. Like, it was, yeah, I don't know. I think it's worse if he would just say like hyper racist shit. But I understand why people would be very, very put off by that kind of thing. So I'm not necessarily for going back and finding dirt on somebody. But if they give you an answer that isn't sufficient, like, okay, I mean, I guess that's. They're going to have to answer for that. Being a public figure and doing things like that, that's part of it. So if you want to be a public figure, try not to be a piece of dog shit to people from time to time.
Gotcha. We got maybe time for one last question. For a short and sweet one, Steven Steen asks, thanks for your question, Steven. He says, a guy in Iowa received a 16-year jail sentence for burning an LGBT flag hanging outside a building. How has PC not gone too far?
I mean, did he burn someone's personal property?
He's burned a flag outside of a building. I mean, if you burn anything outside of a building, that's a crime. I don't know the context of it, but I mean, if someone came out the front of my house and burnt something, I'd probably want to see him locked up too, because that's not normal behavior.
Yeah. That said, I am not for long-term incarceration in general. I don't think it helps people to put them in jail for a bunch of shit, including but not limited to like the drug war. America has a really big problem with incarceration in general. It's kind of, you should look up the 14th Amendment. It's kind of a way that we allow slavery, even though it's not necessarily race related. Most incarcerated people are minorities, and they tend to get harsher sentencing for similar crimes. I can't imagine that's a PC culture thing. Don't take people's shit and burn it? ?
Fair enough. Gotcha. Thank you very much. With that, we appreciate these speakers being here. And folks, so sorry. someone pointed out I made a mistake. I accidentally, a little sleep deprived. I put Jake's link as like a duplicate for both him and Chris. Now Chris's real link is in the description box.
They're gonna be very disappointed if they clicked on that link and expected Chris.
Yeah, it's so now
probably not too much difference.
The links are updated, and thanks for letting me know about that, folks. With that, very excited to have you guys here. Thanks so much again for being here, guys.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
It's been a true joy. By the way, I forgot to mention, Skylar Fiction will be debating a newcomer named Gavin. Gavin's from New Zealand, so not too far from where you are, Chris. He's actually going to be debating on whether or not Christianity is false. So that should be a juicy one.
Pretty easy, but yeah, sure.
Chris, you look like you had something on your mind as well.
I was going to say it's. I always worry when I hear someone from Australia or New Zealand is doing anything in the US, because we're still horribly embarrassed for giving you Ken Ham. But that's another story.
That's funny. Well, we are so thankful to have you all here, folks. Thanks for your questions during the debate. It's been a long time, a lot of good questions, and a long time coming for this debate. So take care, folks. We're off air.
All right.
Thanks so much, guys.
Oh, I'm so glad that it wasn't like that last guy. You can.
Oh yeah, that was a wild one.
You're capable of thought and everything. It was so nice.
Which one was it?
That was the before the Hoven guy. It was the Jordan Peterson guy.
Logan, I think, right?
I don't remember his name. He was really.
I think it was
bad.
Logan.
Didn't you say he couldn't be on for like 6 months after that?
Let's see. Was it because he? Oh wait,
he was bad.
Was it Master Apologist?
No, I think he just had a normal name. I don't think he had like a pseudonym. But yeah, he was not good at the thing he was trying to do. It was bad. No, I think we tend to agree on most things. I just wouldn't attribute it to PC culture. I would say cancel culture is different than PC culture. I would agree with you on cancel culture for the most part, unless it's like, the Me Too type stuff.
Like, if it's Bill Cosby or someone like that, like
like the Weinstein thing. But like the I made. Are you familiar with ContraPoints? I assume you are. She's humongous. She's a trans YouTube creator. She does really great videos.
Okay.
But she got into some hot water about some stuff she said, which has to do with gender politics. But she got canceled by her community as well. And that, like, I have a problem with that kind of shit. Where, people can get a little too excited to be right.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's funny because I'm in a bit of a strange situation where I'm an atheist and I'm an atheist activist, but I'm also sitting on the right side of politics, so I'm a little bit of a rarity there. So I guess I try and look at it as best I can from both sides, and I see huge problems on both sides. But I think it's just a definition. For me, cancel culture is an evolution of extreme PC, but it's
I suppose
definitional. Yeah,
sure.
Never know. We could both be right. We could both be wrong. It's all about perspective.
Yeah. Jim, who is that fucking guy in your chat? He was so mad at me. He said I
heard there was some horrible things getting said.
He said that I don't care about that, but he said that basically you extended an olive branch and I like spit in your face. I'm like, we had a pretty cordial discussion. I don't know. What do you want me to do? I don't know.
Was he saying? Wait, was he saying Chris extended the olive branch?
Yeah, Chris extended the olive branch, and then I don't know who that guy was. I was just trying to find his. He was just so stupid.
Well, I didn't get that impression at all.
Yeah, me either. I don't know. I wasn't trying to be an asshole, but I didn't even feel that strongly. About it.
There's someone being offended for no reason.
I think that's when he got mad at me. It's like I don't know, right wing people in America. Because your right wing is not ours, tend to get very, very offended and stuck in their feelings incredibly quick when they say that the left does that. And it's like, I mean, they might both do it, but goddamn, you guys do it hard. Like, anyway, you have to go do a thing, so I don't want to keep you.
I do. That all good. Thank you very much, and happy to do it again anytime.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
guys.
All right,
Take
guys,
care,
have a good one.
Chris.
I'm going to jump out. Thanks, guys.
You betcha. Thank you. Well, pleasure again, Jake. I appreciate you coming back on. And yeah, well, I hope you have a great night. Hopefully we can have you back on again. Maybe we can get your old buddy Jesse Lee Peterson.
Oh,
You know,
man.
here.
Hey, you ask me anytime. I'm probably good for it. I won't be available until the new year at this point, but like probably the 2nd, maybe. I don't know. We might be playing D&D at some point though. So, but yeah, ask me anytime. Always happy to
You
come
got
on.
it, dude.
All
Cool
right.
beans. Thanks so much. Have a great night, man.
You too. Take it easy.
Take care.
Whoo, his chat. I don't think that went terrible. Oops, wrong one. Nope. Yeah! No. You guys don't get the prayer. You don't get the fucking prayer. The YouTube chat was the worst part. Absolutely. I wanted to debate that fucking guy. No, you don't get the corn. You don't get it. You don't get it. Is it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? You guys do get a stock though. You guys got to 800. All right, let's talk for a while, and then Sarah wants to do some art. Look at this chat. It's beautiful. Give us our daily coin. This is America. We have the right to pray. Gosh darn it. Yeah, the chat was so fucking bad. I don't know why. When white people start saying what's racist for black people, the PC culture has gone too far. When white people start saying what's racist for black people, I disagree. I guess it depends. I guess it depends. This is very contextual, right? Like, if a white person is saying, black guy, you should be offended, someone said that, like, that's fucked up. But if it's people in a white space, and one guy says, like, oh, look at these N-words, I think a white guy can turn to the other white guy and go, that's fucking racist, dog. Like, you know what I mean? Jesus is Lord. Fuck. So many chuds as his mods. Yeah, he tries to keep it even, but yeah. Where did your badge go? I see your badge right there, dude. You have VIP and 11th month subscribers. Your 5K cheer badge? Oh, go down to your chat. Click the little gear boy next to chat, and you can change it. It should be okay. Yeah, mine changes in between channels too. I don't know why that happens. But yeah, if you go to the little gear next to the chat thing, it should be able to. Bits are offline at the moment. Wait, can you do not biddy boys? Can you not do bit donos right now? Found the perfect thing for your TV for Christmas Day. Darth Vader Yule log 5 hours. Yeah, you can eat my ass. Oh well, I didn't want to eat your ass. Oh, nice. Oh, that's beautiful. That's fucking amazing. Alright. We're just gonna have Vada here. Thank you. Every once in a while I forget that YouTube is a hellscape made of purely wheat-based products. It really is. Now do Qui-Gon. Do they have Qui-Gon? You can just hang out. I think that discussion went fine. I do not think he is correct. I'm pretty confident that you know, insofar as winning is concerned in these, I think I did a good enough job to get my point across. I thought he was going to be chuddier, so I'm glad he wasn't. Yeah, I appreciate how polite he was too. Like that's not usually, in my experience with right-wing Australians, they're not usually good people. That guy seems reasonable. He's also a trans. He's fine with trans people and gays and all that shit. So that's good shit. That's the good stuff. That's the best I can hope for. We can work on your policy later. You just need to get to basic human rights and you're good with me. So does anybody have any questions? Or comments or anything like that? There's no Qui-Gon Yule log, Jake. I'm sorry. Flever, I'll never forgive you. It's over. Do I get nervous for debates? I do not. I do not get nervous for debates. I have done so many of these. I didn't prep for this at all. I literally went to Hannah's house after eating. I went to Hannah's house. We recorded a chick tract, and then I came over here. I talked to Sarah for a minute and turned this on. I don't. Yeah, it does. It's not a thing. I don't prep unless it's something very specific. I did think about going hard, but I realized that he wasn't anti-trans or anything. If he was anti-trans, this would have been a fucking dunker. I would have put this shit up on YouTube. I would have had to dunk real hard. But I might still put it up on YouTube, but you know, it's not that